to Be Your Brilliance Podcast. I think this is episode 4, season 2.
Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, Alana.
I know, right?
Like, this has been a feat this year.
And we're actually in the same country.
True.
At the same time in Canada, which we would call home, probably.
Yeah, very true.
I call home.
I do too. Yes, absolutely I do.
So, yeah, this is the first one of the whole season that we've been together at home.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. I know. And speaking of home, this is a different home for me.
Yes.
Little downsizing intentionally. There's been a little bit of a process to do this, but we are sitting in a it's not a brand new, renovated fifth wheel, which, you know, we could get into another podcast on the reason and the purpose and the, you know, all the things.
That will be one,
Yeah, for sure. But here we are set up and ready to chat about a few things that are on our mind and in our hearts. And so I think to kind of give a bit of a snapshot of what is going on for us in our life right now and for a lot of other people, but we are in Kelowna, BC, Canada, North America. It is August, and typically this time of year we deal with a little bit of smoke here and there because BC ends up being on fire. I mean, Alberta, BC, California, variety places.
Washington, Oregon,
We are, I think, like 4 days post-evacuation on some massive fires that have happened here in the Okanagan. So, pretty unique time.
Yeah, it's been, some people probably heard about the fires that we had in Kelowna in 2003. That was before my time. I moved here 2006, so I wasn't here for that, but there's been a lot of parallels and similarities that people have been discussing, just how awful the fires were, and obviously there's people that have lost homes and businesses and structures, and thankfully, as far as I'm aware, there's no loss of life, because that's obviously very tragic. So it's just kind of inspired us, I think, to not so much talk about the fires, but more talk about, I think, what everybody's kind of feeling, the undertones, and, you know, maybe talking a little bit more about resilience and overcoming. So I'm gonna let you jump in there, Krisstael.
You know, I was lacking inspiration for a while. As you know, I was going through a bit of a phase of transition and changing and traveling way too much, and really not. I mean, we're like, we should do a podcast. I'm like, yeah, not yet. I don't even know. I'm like,
how many countries have you been to in the last year?
Truthfully, it's not so much. Well, it's been 5 countries, I think, but
several times over.
Yeah, there's been a repeat of those things. But truthfully, and then even when I got back to Kelowna here, it was, you know, staying with you guys while my RV was being renovated, and then, you know, getting here and then getting settled for like 4 days and then evacuated because of fires. And so what I find fascinating is I was like, okay, there must be a shift in what I've been asking for a little bit, which is I just need simplicity and some consistency for a period of time. And there must be, because inspiration showed up of like, oh, okay, I'm inspired. You ready? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Can you please be ready?
And then it's getting our time schedules to match.
No kidding. In fact, speaking of, this will be a quick one because we're going to an event tonight. We don't very rarely get an evening.
Yeah, that's right.
To take advantage of it. In your hot new car.
Yeah. In the hot, it's actually, this might be the last hot weekend of Kelowna, but it's pretty hot out too.
Yeah, true.
We've turned the AC off, just so y'all know, so.
Yeah, if we start sweating, feel privileged.
Yeah.
We're just trying to keep the sound.
But there's only audio and video.
So, I think the inspiration lately has been, well, I'll just say this, like, we're going to get into this in a different podcast with your psychologist, right? She sounds brilliant, but really talking about overwhelm and how do we deal with things piling up and chaos and where do I go for for guidance and for not just guidance, but answers and steps and what do I do? Like, what do I do? Lately, it's been, there's been lots of conversation and I have a pretty strong stance in one direction on this, but I won't get into that at this point, but I'll say that there's been lots of questioning around intention of what's happening globally, but also what's happening regionally and why we are going through so much chaos and trauma and crisis and stuff worldwide, regionally, and then in our small communities and so on and so on.
Well, and it's not to say that shit doesn't happen, because we know that it does, but I think there's an undertone that everybody's feeling is a sense of there's things that happen, and then there's the accumulation of things that are out of our control. And I think that's where people really get into that space of panic and overwhelm and not being able to be grounded and desperate, right? We get into that desperation and that fear because there's nothing tangible we can hold on to. I mean, whether it's a fire, or whether it's a flood or a drought, those are natural weather things, but it also could be, there's been lots of changes around, I would say not just weather, but, when we think about a lot of things that we don't necessarily recognize as being an issue until we're forced with having to deal with it, meaning it's a time for reflection. We don't actually think about what's important, what's our priorities, like what really matters, how do we want to live our lives. COVID's a perfect example. That's an illness, right? Or let's say we're faced with some sort of, it could be a disease, or it could be anything where we feel like we are powerless in the situation. That really, that's where we have to start looking, at the big picture and saying, what does this mean for me, and how do I get through it and thrive in it?
There's been a lot of people, asking me, and I think maybe, on one hand I understand why they ask me, and on the other hand I'm like, who am I for you to ask me this answer? But all I can do is share my own experience, and I think part of it is there are times for sure in this last year that I was out of body. I'm like, whoa,
survival
in all of the things that I know how to do to take care of myself mentally, emotionally, physically, every day, in everywhere that I am, and the boundaries that I set, and the structures that I create, and all the things that I do to make sure that I can be as thriving as possible and available for people as possible. There's definitely been times I was like, what? I'm cross-eyed, Alana. I can't even see you. Please navigate this for me. Because help. I need some time for me to ground myself. And how do I do that? So I guess I'll just go into part of the things that are the solutions and resolutions. I always go back to when I was like 15 to 16 years old, and it was a pissed off time for me for sure, because I was coming into kind of understanding me, kind of understanding what life was about, and then making some decisions. Do I stick my head in the sand about this whole bullshit human experience and whatever that I can see happening? Or do I live up to what it is that I'm supposed to be here for? And what I'm supposed to be here for isn't one thing.
No.
It's an evolving, shifting, changing. Who am I now? Who am I now?
Phases and stages.
Who am I now?
Yeah.
So at that point, there was just a decision around that personal accountability. It's like, because it's not easy. It's like, okay, do I be a thriving, contributing human being in as much as possible, going through the growth phases I can in my life, or do I just not? Because there's an option.
For sure, and I think sometimes that's even done unconsciously, where we just default into blame, or we just intentionally, it's that willful ignorance. We just stay blind, or we just confirm ourselves with the lie continually, so that we don't actually see or feel the truth. I think that a lot of times that's where we it's hard to be personally accountable. And it's hard too when, you know, even when you're personally accountable, doesn't guarantee it's going to turn out okay, right? Doesn't mean that everything's going to be wonderful and great and things are going to turn out the way we want. So then we get resentful and frustrated, and then we feel justified for our blaming and for not having to be accountable. It's a hard place to exist. You know, this is a stupid kind of funny example, but I've always been one since I was little to recycle. Like, and I know people will debate about it, but to me, I'm just like, it makes sense. Why would we not reuse things? Whether that's cardboard or plastics or cans, like why would we not reuse them? It just, it's logical to me. And here I feel like I'm doing it my whole life. You know, we separate our cardboard and all the time. And you go to the States, and this is no knock on the US, but I was just really surprised that they don't have any infrastructure for recycling. And like, I was still, like, we were just down there in the summer, I was still separating my garbage and my recycling. And even though I'm like, I don't know if they're going to do anything with it, but I'm still going to do it. I'm in the hotel putting the bottles in different places. And it's just an example, I think, of where sometimes, like, I'm trying to be personally accountable, but I can't fix the big picture of whether somebody else chooses to think that that's valuable. But it doesn't mean that I stopped doing it.
True.
I mean, that's the irony is I was still separating my bottles, even though there was no purpose to it per se. It still was my accountability of saying, but if enough people did this, if enough people were conscious of it, then that's how change happens.
So I think also the big thing, my girlfriend Carrie, who's Canadian and lives in Texas, does the same thing. It's so funny. She's got this recycle bag in her closet, and I stayed with her a couple times, a few times actually in the last few years. And she's like, I know they don't have anything for it, but let's do it anyway. I'm like, I totally agree.
Yeah.
But I think one of the biggest things about the personal accountability is, what does that make you feel?
Right.
Because no matter what the result is of, I was talking to somebody the other day about this, about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not for anyone else but yourself.
100%.
The same with staying accountable to your values, your character, and your nobody sees it. I mean, not often do they actually see it.
Right.
So the whole purpose and point is actually, what does it make you feel?
Right.
And if it makes you feel empowered and joyful and loving and contributing and all of those things, then beautiful. That there's the motive.
Right.
And not only that, but what comes from taking action in those ways is miraculous, blissful, joyful experiences.
Right.
Because that's the energy we're resonating.
And that's exactly what I feel, you know, talking about the solution, especially in scenarios where we can't necessarily have direct influence on the circumstances, the situation. And sometimes if we sit with the heaviness of the situation, it's a lot. It's a lot for the human psyche to even like integrate. Like there's sometimes like I don't even want to think about it, right? It's a lot for anybody to process. So the only thing that, you know, in my experience, and I've had many conversations in my office, especially over the years of COVID, of, you know, people just feeling so completely disillusioned and so almost like blindsided, right? Like there was a belief system, and then all of a sudden it's like, what is happening? And, you know, my conversation was always like, you know, you're not here to fix anyone. You're here to be your best self, which means you have to raise your frequency. We have to become more resilient to our environment, whether that's physical and resilience, being healthier, right? Whether it's emotional, mental, or spiritual resilience, which I think, you know, that's what I'd like to jump into more today, because if we're not, it doesn't matter how much we fret about the reality is the reality, and it will affect us, right? Like, we have to rise above it so that our frequency, our whole being doesn't resonate with the negativity, with the anger, with the fear.
It flows through you.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's actually, and again, someone I was talking to recently, you know, I said the most, okay, don't even quote myself. I don't know what I said, but what I'm thinking right now is,
good thought.
I'm like, what did I say? I don't even remember. But that happens often.
Yeah.
But the whole point is making sure that we are objectively, I mean, it's a lost art for sure. And I'm excited about all of this because it really is coming back into practice or teaching people that have never done it before.
Right.
How do you be objective in your feelings? First of all, because we're feeling feelings. We don't think them. We feel feelings and then we think about them.
Right.
So how can we be objective about it? Like look at our feelings rather than just
going
feeling
down the
them.
rabbit hole.
Right.
With them.
And then how do we look at what we're thinking? So literally, I actually envision myself separate from me in this this illusion, this experience, this whatever is going on as a human being.
Yeah.
And I look at myself. I look at the circumstance. If I can, that's where it helps me to be that filter so that the emotions flow through me. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling despair. Oh, I'm looking at it. I'm feeling it, but then I'm looking at it. And when I can look at it, it moves, it changes, it shifts.
Yeah.
And so I think the capability to let ourselves or ground ourselves in, I don't even want to call it grounding. Maybe it's grounding, I don't know, but just being a vessel.
Centering.
Yeah, being a vessel rather than being something that things get stuck to or that we get stuck in. And the going back just a little bit to your comment about this is just blindsided. Oh man, that is so on purpose. Just trying. Like, how do you actually? I'm second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and how I used to win all the time was I would blindside them. I'd do something I wasn't supposed to do, almost get like disqualified, and then they'd be all messed up in their head because I did something I wasn't supposed to do and hurt them really bad or whatever I was doing, and then I had them. I'd have them the capability to get them to follow me around the ring,
right,
and then just pick apart. It was point sparring. It was ITF Taekwondo. It was full contact, but point sparring, and that's the same as what's going on right now. It's like, how do we massively mess up these people's heads and hearts and whatever?
Right.
Let's literally blindside them, and it's not even all of a sudden. It's been one thing that I'm so excited about what's happening right now is that it's actually that blatant. That our experiences right now are so abrupt that it is traumatic, like it is traumatizing to people, communities,
For
whatever.
sure.
But it's moving us into that resolution. Like, okay, I'm traumatized, or I'm feeling this, I'm overwhelmed, I can't figure this out. I need the solution. Whereas sometimes if the contrast isn't strong enough, we don't move in there.
No.
We don't go there.
Well, and that's again where I think that choice comes in, because a lot of I could say that a lot of the experiences in COVID I had was traumatic. Obviously, my city, burning. Like, I mean, there's trauma with that, but trauma just means it's outside of our realm of coping, right? It's something where it's like this. It's not just being blindsided. It's something where our ability to comprehend, integrate, understand, cope with is not there. So, but that leaves us in a choice. We can either live in that trauma, which will develop anxiety and depression and, insomnia and, probably physical ailments and
100%.
Right. So, or we can look at it and say, okay, this has been traumatic for me, but how do I come through it? Because the only way that we can actually, and I think, like you said, a catalyst to actually move us ahead and move us forward and actually totally be able to learn something is being able to say, okay, even though this has happened to me, it doesn't have to continue to affect me. And so the number one way to do that is let yourself process the emotions. Doesn't mean shut them down. It doesn't mean I'm not going to feel this. It doesn't mean we have to rehash it and relive it. It means that we actually have to just let our body feel the emotions so that they can be released and we're not hanging on to them. There's no emotional attachment now. And then we can say, okay, what was that about? Like, what is why was I triggered? And what can I do differently? Maybe I took something personally, maybe I made an assumption, maybe I
Oh man, you have
an
no idea.
expectation.
You have no idea how bipolar I really look when nobody's looking.
Right.
Holy moly! Like I'm like, I think I said this to someone the other day. I was like, you know, if people actually realized what I processed in like 10 seconds within myself, to then go, holy crap! What am I feeling? How am I feeling this? You know, looking at it, and then it changes in less than 5 seconds. Yeah. Like, oh, I was irate, upset, freaking out, overwhelmed, whatever it was, and then it'll shift, and it'll shift in a very short period of time. Years ago, I didn't realize, or I didn't think that was possible. Yeah. So part of not being able to actually shift years ago, like early 20s, was, in fact, when I met you, I was dealing with adrenal fatigue, and a big part of that was letting emotions move through my body. Right. And not being so overwhelmed and stimulated. So part of that is the realization that when you actually get to feel your feelings, right, you look at them, they dissipate. Right. They move, they shift, they change. And it's okay that might make you feel like you're whacked. Yeah. Because man,
sometimes you have to. Right. Like, I think that
I'm like, how can I be so blissfully happy and then I'm just completely like sobbing sad and then I'm good.
Well, I know that we can think about emotions as like waves, right? It comes on you, and it's sometimes like a freaking tidal wave, where you're like, oh my god, I'm gonna die, this is awful, I can't, like, that's where we get afraid of the emotion, because we're like, this feels too intense, I don't want to feel it. But if we just rode the wave, like, even statistically speaking, they say an emotion, if you actually release it and feel it, it's about 90 seconds. I'm sorry, I've had 2 children. I can do anything for 90 seconds.
No
anything. So, like, saying that, if we're just willing to and not even label that emotion as good or bad, I think that's another side. It's like, oh, I don't want to feel anger because it's bad. Oh, I don't want to feel fear because it's bad. It's not bad. It's just a feeling. It's neutral. It's nothing. If we just let ourselves experience it, it's behaviors that can be bad. Like, maybe we're not expressing that emotion or anger or whatever in a healthy way. The action can be bad. The emotion itself is not.
Right. Very true.
So if we just let ourselves experience it, then we can move through it and be like, okay, like, what do I need to learn here? What was that about? How do I change that? Change me, not change out here, because then I don't have to constantly be in that space, and then I'm processing the emotions, I'm leaving them, letting them go. And then I can be in a mental space of actually being able to have constructive conversations, to be able to, look for solutions rather than come from that emotional place. Because if we're not dealing with it, it's coming out.
True.
Whether we like it or not, it's coming out, but it's going to come out in the ways we don't want. It's going to be completely inappropriate, or it'll usually come out with the people we love the most, and, they're not our punching bags.
Well, and you would know this so well from a naturopathic perspective, because I mean, sometimes it just doesn't come out for years, and next thing you know, we have some physical illness that our body's saying, hey, pay attention, you're suppressing this emotion over here, and this organ is hanging on to it, right, or whatever, there's discord in the body.
Comes up all the time. It's actually the first place that I actually really learned about that was in Chinese medicine. I mean, that's been around for thousands of years. They've recognized the connection between anger in the liver, or grief and sadness in the lung, or anxiety in the spleen, fear and shame in the kidney bladder. Like, these emotions have been identified and understood for centuries, right? And yet we're so I think just disconnected from learning or knowing how to process our emotions.
I'll say this too. Sorry, Alana, I just need to interject, because we're not taught.
No. 100%.
Like, holy shit. Like, educational systems and bullshit, typical educational systems do not teach people how to actually be human. Be human. Like, they don't. And that's an inspiration. I woke up this morning going, maybe we restructure an educational system here. In fact, I have a feeling it's coming down the pipeline.
Oh, I think people are already on that path, because there is so many times where kids are failing not because they can't do things academically.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they can't self-regulate themselves
Mm-hmm.
enough and process what they're feeling to actually be able to be available and focused to learn.
Exactly.
So it's not that the content is bad, it's just they are not in an emotional mental space from a number of reasons where they can actually learn. And I think either we're going to have to adapt the school system, or we actually have to find better ways for kids.
Well, I'll tell you this. The educational system and where it comes from and where it's managed is never going to adapt.
No. Well, it always comes from a grassroots change. I think that's the reality.
There's a foothold with that global educational system that they'll never let go of. Of which, again, like you said, a grassroots change. Which I'm excited about. You know, I'm so excited about that type of thing and
yes.
you know, generationally actually getting back to, not just getting back, it's not getting back, it's actually an evolution. It's an evolution of, because we're different now.
Yeah.
And our children are different now, and we get to help them be the best versions of themselves with a bit of a blend, right? So, but I wanna go back real quick because, you know, you and I, this is
we go on tangents.
4 hours long, which is amazing. 3 bottles of wine. Speaking of, I drank 3 times, so you need to cheers.
This is a bubbly red.
Yes,
It's
and this is
Lambrusco.
Yeah,
Organic.
I'll say this is actually probably a perfect example of the blend of Alana and Krisstael.
I like bubbles. She likes red.
We're good. So she bought this for me for the housewarming or the fifth wheel warming.
I bought champagne for her before and it didn't go as well. I liked it, but I figured this is a good blend.
Tasty. But going back to just a minute.
Emotions, resilience.
You. So, in all of what's been going on lately, what are some of the things, tangible things? Because I keep saying to everybody, hey, you know what? You're welcome to share the bullshit that's going on right now with me. Make sure it's vetted and true first.
100%.
And because otherwise it's fear mongering. And we do it by accident.
Totally.
We share stuff because we're like, holy shit, and we share it. And we really just went, holy shit, because we were nervous, afraid, overwhelmed, whatever.
Right.
And then we share that nervous, afraid, overwhelmed, whatever with other people.
Yeah, we like, misery likes company.
Right. And we're just shocked. We're like, holy crap, really? And we send it to people that we know potentially can filter that. But what I've said to some people lately is, first and foremost, vet the stuff you look at. So don't just look at it. Look at it, check into how you feel. You know, ask yourself what you're feeling. Then go, is this worth my time to go fact check? Like, I might use that word. But actually vet it. Like, make sure it's true for you.
Right.
Then when you share it, when you share the information, you send it with the solution or resolution that you are actually doing first.
Well, and I think too, it might be even just to even step back within that, make sure you're grounded when you do it.
True.
Because if you're feeling fear and panic and whatever emotion, you're being driven by that emotion when you share. So you're not coming from a logical place. You're not coming from a grounded place to say, is this valid? Is this real? Does this resonate? Even before you look it up and say, what's the source? The reality is, if you are not centered, you're coming from a skewed perspective that now you're going to share something that maybe if you were actually had a day to think about it, you wouldn't.
True.
So I've gotten to the point where I don't share anything, or, you know, if I have to respond to something, my first reaction, like, we're so like, oh my gosh, and I got to send it. And I'm like, nope, you're not allowed. Like, you have to give it a day or a few hours, depending on what the situation is, so that I can make sure I'm coming at it from a grounded place.
Oh, trust me, I've deleted shit.
Absolutely.
And then I've sent stuff that I'm like, darn, I should delete that.
Shoot. Where's our technology when we need it? Totally. So I think that's 100% valid, is that, you know, I think we have to recognize what's the purpose. You know, I kind of tell people that there's 2 reasons why we communicate, and that can be face-to-face or that could be online. And I think the first reason is because we feel like we have to justify ourselves. We're trying to convince someone of something. We're trying to justify our opinions. We're trying to prove ourselves somehow, which never comes from a good place. And the second is because we generally just want to connect with someone.
True.
Because we want them to know who we are. and like why we exist and where I'm coming from, help you to understand me better.
True.
Not because I'm trying to convince you, just because I want to connect with you. And so what do we do when we want to connect? We share.
That's actually a really good point, because my sister-in-law, really strong, independent, vivacious woman, said to me at the beginning of COVID bullshit, listen, I don't want to hear any of it. Please don't send any to me. And so, here we are 3 years later, and there's still stuff going on, whatever. And sometimes I feel like I want to send her stuff because I want her to know me. Not that I need her to be on the same page. But I'm like, hey, just so you know. So it's a good point, but I never thought about it that way.
As soon as we get the energy that we're trying to convince someone or, justify our opinion, I'm always like, you're communicating for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Unless they ask you and say, hey, tell me about that. Well, obviously that's different, right? But if you're actually sharing something because you want them to change their opinion on something, or you want them to have your opinion, or you to feel, so that you're not feeling judged in a situation, don't bother.
Yeah.
Just don't share.
It's good practice. And that's, I think, one of the most important things I remind myself of also is it's practice.
Totally.
We did not come to this planet to be perfect. And it's okay that we're not. And I'm going to say this, it's okay that I'm not. And that every time I do make a mistake, look at something, be accountable, whatever, there's no judgment personally on myself for that. I just go, oh, okay, noted. I'm going to make a different choice next time.
Right.
And in saying that too, Alana, what have been some of the things that you've done lately to help create more of a solution or resolution for the circumstance for you?
Well, I think I am pretty mindful about exposure.
Yeah.
Unless, like, I don't watch TV.
No.
I haven't paid for cable for 5-8 years probably. And if I don't feel good about something, I just turn it off. So I'm really mindful about what I watch, because it's not because I'm being naive to the world. The reality is I just know if God wants me to know something, I'll know it. Somebody will talk about it. It'll come up on, somewhere. So, but I don't need to seek out hurtful, chaotic things. So I'm very mindful of what I watch, which frees me up to be very intentional about what I do. So I'm constantly listening to a podcast, or there's certain programs that I watch that are, I think, very informative, especially from medical side. I listen to a ton of books. And so being very intentional about what I'm actually putting in there, because that's what percolates, right? Yeah. That's what we start thinking about.
And that's where we manifest our life. That's where we actually create, or our life, let's call it, manifest from that place of influence, or what we're paying attention to, and what we know and what we don't know. So being really conscious and aware of what is automatically being, where you're being manipulated. And again, I mean, man, this is a whole other podcast with kids and social media and blah, blah. Yeah. We are definitely going into that at some point. But let's not talk about kids, let's talk about adult kids.
Oh yeah, most adults don't censor their screen time. I'm sure most people look on their phone, and because you can look on your Apple, or I'm sure it's on all the Androids too. You can look and see how much you've used your phone. They'll even break it down. You were this much on social media. You were this much on, do it. You might be surprised at how much you're actually on your phone. And I get that, well, that's where newspapers are, and that's where we read our emails, and, people use them as a lot of different devices, but, that's where be mindful about how you're using it, because it's simple to just go and look into your Instagram or, Facebook or whatever. I have 0 notifications on my phone. Outside of my family, like calling or texting me, my immediate family, I don't get a single notification. So until I decide to pick up my phone, I just don't get back to people.
True. Yeah, same with me.
Yeah.
I actually, again, same thing was I noticed it. I was like, wow, automatically I just went to a social media, whatever. This was, a year or 2 ago. And I've done a few cleanses over the years for different reasons, I'm like, this tracking and tracing bullshit is just not okay with me. And I'm going to just pay attention to my privacy and make make a decision around who gets to actually know what I'm up to as much as I can.
Right.
And so that really, I did a bunch of cleanse on my computer and VPNs, and, you know, took the social media off my main phone, stuck it on a phone that is not on, that I don't carry around, and I go on there every once in a while, you know, and mostly because I was noticing my own habits with that, right? But going back to the exposure, it's the manipulation emotionally. It's so fascinating. My nephews last summer came out to visit, and it was interesting to watch their cleanse for 2.5 weeks off social media, because they were staying with Auntie Krisstael, which is fun.
They didn't know that was happening. Lord.
They had no idea. I actually didn't even really know either. All I knew was we're going to get out and have some really good fun and get out. I mean, this valley, when it's not on fire, is actually, you know, really fun to be in outside. Yeah. And so kept them busy, and, you know, I had to work until, I was working at that point until 11 every day, get up at, you know, 6 and work and say, hey guys, you guys got to go do these things. But back to the point was, without talking about the structure that I created for them or with them, we were kind of figuring out the structure in the first 3-4 days. And my one nephew, who was, I think he was, forgive me, I think he was, 9, 10, something like that. He's gonna be mad at Auntie Krisstael. But
we'll go with ish.
Yeah.
Ish.
There's 14 of them. Like, okay. Anyway, so he physically got sick, and he was physically homesick, and got physically ill, like flu-like symptoms on day 3. And I'm like, and then he's messaging and texting his dad and his stepmom saying, I want to come back. And then his dad messages me and says, hey, can we chat? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, you know, he wants to come home. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not happening. I know exactly what's happening. He's on social media, and this is the first time he's away from his brother and sister. He's first time he's away with his cousins and whatever. And they've been every day in a variety of times been connected, texting, talking, social media to his sister and brother and whatever. And friends, and he's getting himself way more homesick because of the exposure of that, right? So anyway, what was amazing was I realized exactly what was happening, and I just sat him down. First of all, I was like empathetic, and, you know, I was like, you're okay, whatever, and this is just this. I think really pretty confident, you can tell me not, but that this physical illness is actually because you're physically sad, and your emotions are actually managing your body.
Right.
And I said, what if we try a test and see, and what if this is true? What if it's because you're missing your brother or whatever? What if? So let's try this where you get to let them know you're not going to pay attention to their social media. You're not going to look at their stuff for the next 2 days. And let's see if you get better. And I don't want you to leave, and in fact, you're not leaving, so so we got to figure this out. Right. But in the meantime, what if? And he's like, yeah, that makes sense, you know? Yeah. And the next day, just totally fine, happy, whatever, no sickness, no nothing, no. I was like, it was so obvious that the emotional impact of that social anxiety, I'll call it, impacted him so strongly. I was like, wow, this was crazy.
It's amazing what our body will manifest.
Yes.
For our benefit.
Yes. Yeah.
Or what its perception of benefit, right?
No kidding.
I'm not saying that there aren't physical things, but more often than not, there is some emotional connection to what's going on.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think I don't imagine that people have a lot of surprise around, hey, you know what, you need to be mindful about social media. I think there's enough conversation. I mean, watch The Social Dilemma if you don't know. But I think it's so relevant. It's so relevant because, like, when I'm chaotic, when I'm feeling overwhelmed, which people are like, you get chaotic? You feel like anxious inside?
Oh, I have a photo. Or 3.
I'm just really good at, like, not showing it.
I love it.
So, but truth is like, I have to like turn everything off. Like, I can't, it's not going to help me to, you know, bury my head in social media, or, you know, go to something really stimulating, and you know, that's even a movie, like it's like, oh, I'm going to listen to my podcast, and maybe I'm going to, you know, paint my nails or whatever. I'm going to do something that's very like calming because I need to get grounded, or I'll go out in nature is a huge one for me. But so I think it's just, we got to be more mindful. At the end of the day, we can't get away from it. This is a conversation I have with my kids. Like, I realize that this is part of the integration, like you're using them at school. Like, we can't get away, you know, it's not going back to the 80s and saying, everybody, we're just going to get rid of our phones and we're just going to go back to like, you know, what is a little telephone with a cup?
Yeah.
The truth is we need them, but it's just, we've got to be more mindful, because if we can't find spaces to be quiet, we will never find groundedness. Like for me, it's simplicity, and I've been working on that on so many levels. That's been a mission of my life. And anybody that knows me, they're like, you've been saying that forever. I'm like, I know. It's a very intentional thing, but it's not always easy to manifest when you have a lot of people that depend on you, when you have a business and you know, a busy practice, and you've got kids and a husband, and like and you're trying to, you know, spread time with friends and family, and like it's not like there's a lack of things to do. So then you have to start being intentional with what does simplification actually look like. And it's not as, you know, it might be as simple as cleaning out your closets. I do that often because it feels good. But it's also freeing up my time, freeing up my schedule, saying no to things. It means that, you know, restructuring, you know, my life, my day, so that, and making commitments to myself, whether that be for an appointment. You know, I've been committed to doing like personal training. I've always been active my whole life, but this is the first year I've been like, no, I'm committing to this because it's an intentional time for me. And yes, it's another appointment, but it's actually simplifies because now I'm not trying to think about when am I going to fit that in. I'm being very intentional about it. And I think simplification doesn't mean sell everything you own. No. And move across the world.
Be efficient. Right. I think we go back to, I'll just share a little bit because it's been
You've simplified a lot. I think you have some things to share.
But part of it is, I didn't realize that some of my friends will, not so much you, because you're very similar, but some of my friends would say, you know, Krisstael, you've been very selfish. And we'll call it full of self. You know, really had some good boundaries. Structured boundaries around, hey, if I don't do this, I'm not a good human.
Right.
If I don't do this, I'm not very friendly at all. I'm not a good friend. I'm not a good, you know, spouse when I've been a spouse.
Right.
You know, so over the years, I've just got those boundaries pretty strong because I'm like, hey, if I don't actually set this foundation here, then if I get into chaotic circumstances or whatever, diversity, I'm lost. I'm totally lost. So part of so this last year in traveling, it was anytime, like even, it was challenging because I get settled somewhere, and in the first week I'd get settled somewhere, I'd have to be thinking where I'm going in the next 3-4 weeks, and do I have my physical health? Like my physical health is, where's my water? Like it's simple things. Where's my good water? Every day. Huge. And we don't realize, like, I can't, the first thing I do is figure out where my water is. Because food's secondary to water to me. But where's my water? Where's my good food? Where's my sleep? Where's my peacefulness when I sleep? Like, am I peaceful? And is it, you know... Not on a couch. No. Like in a proper bed. And then also, where do I get to be physically active? Because for me, it's definitely a helpful thing, emotionally, mentally, physically. And it's not go to the gym. It's just physically active, out in nature, grounded. Opportunities to do that. Yeah. And so it was like every time I get settled somewhere, I'd have to be thinking, and that was tough. Like, and I know some things that I'm not doing, which is I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to travel every month. That's why I said, everybody, I'm planting myself in Texas this year, and that's a hub, and I just, you know. I even tried to offer to get out of smoke next week, and she's like, no, I just need to be planted. It's illegal for me to leave right now, because I have 5 weeks, and then I'm, you know, intending on traveling. We'll see what's going on. But, So part of the, let's call it boundaries or grounded things, is the first things I look at is like when I'm in chaos or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where's my physical health?
Mm-hmm.
How do I manage my physical health? So for me, it's being active. Where's my water? Where's my nutrients? Where's my supplementation?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the certain supplements that I need to be taking or that are helpful for me right now.
Right.
You know, do I need a fridge? Whatever
Right.
that is. Then can I shut a door and not be around humans? That's essential. Oh man, I'm not a very friendly person. If I don't have the capability to be in a contained area without other people for a while, then I can come out of the door and I'm fine. Right. But I definitely need that.
You need to fuel yourself. I think it's important people recognize if they're introverted, extroverted. It's not whether you like people or not. It's where you get filled, and you need to have time by yourself to fill
alone. And here's the thing: like, I don't go in the room and get on social media.
No,
I be quiet. I sleep. I journal. I, even just go in my car. One of my favorite places to ground is to actually just go for a drive. Because nobody can find me. Especially if I turn off my notifications, my GPS, nobody can find me. I'm like, okay, that's it. Yeah. Do I have GPS in my car? I should actually disable that. So, but then why I'm bringing this up is because I think a lot of people are in it and don't have yet to set the structure and the boundaries that they go, hey, if chaos occurs, how do I manage the things that are necessary for me to be a stable, good human and contributing?
Right. Well, they try and establish that when they're in chaos.
Right.
Not before.
Right.
Which you need to establish as habits before the chaos happens, because forget it.
Yeah.
You're in chaos.
Right.
How are you going to sit in your room quietly and journal?
Yeah, true.
Your brain's just going to be like, you're just so anxious you won't be able to be calm. So you have to create those practices before it.
What I find is my ears open. So when we talk about intuition, connecting to spirit, connecting to God, connecting to whatever guidance is the definition of that for people, the definition of truth, love, whatever that is. When I set up those boundaries, I get to hear. I don't actually have to think a thing. I get to actually hear what the next step is, whether that's literally, I'll get these inspirations, like I'll get quiet for like whatever, I get 5 minutes, whatever, and I'm like, oh, I gotta call this person, or I gotta do this, or I've gotta, oh, I needed to buy that, or geez, man, maybe it's not Hawaii I need to be in,
right,
or whatever,
again.
Right, again and again, but that's where that grounding and that clarity and that those boundaries around setting those standards of self-care are so important.
So you can get there.
Yeah. And I'm extremely rude about it quite often. I'm like, no, I need to do this. No, I gotta go to bed. No, I'm gonna get, Alana's a late night and Alana, I gotta go to bed. And I'm like, hey girl, wake up at 6 o'clock with me. She's like, nope, sleeping in. It's perfect. Okay, perfect. Do you know how many nights I stayed up? But those are the things that, when we know, we can then tailor those to be in the circumstance, in chaos, and actually know how to manage ourselves, right?
I mean, that's ultimately, at the end of the day, I think when we're in any form of chaos, we want to feel guided. We don't want to be coming from fear. We don't want to be coming from anger or anxiety. And I know that's easier said than done, but when you have those practices, I know for me, there's times where I'm like, God, where are you? I'm struggling. I'm just not seeing clarity. I'm not seeing answers. I'm beating my head against the wall. And it used to frustrate me when I'd read in the Bible, it says, seek and you will find. And I'm like, I'm seeking, but was I really? Because I wasn't actively taking quiet time. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't intentionally bringing to the table, these are the things that are going on, and then just being open to listening to guidance. Like for me, the Holy Spirit moves when I can actually quiet this so I can hear this. And if we're too busy in the analytical, we're never going to get there. So, I mean, it's purposeful that we seek, but seeking means also doing the practices that allow us to get there. Not just saying, well, I'm doing it, so why are you not like giving me any clarity?
So I think one of the beautiful things too, and please remind me, we'll do a podcast on this for sure, is receiving. So what you just said, and again in the Bible you quoted, seek
and you shall find.
And you shall find. I'd like to reframe that with God right now. We'll just say, hey, God. Let's debate on that for a second. Because sure, seek, but really, it's receive and you will find. So you need to play it out. But then you need to open your ears. A person needs to be available to receive. And that was a huge theme for me this last year, was just really genuinely feeling worthy and deserving and valuable and all of these things to hear, receive the information, receive the things in life, receive support, love, finances, whatever those things are. But I think the real true missing link, honestly, is receiving, because when we get out of our head, what do we actually do?
Right.
We turn the tap this direction. We don't go this way.
Totally.
We don't go seeking outwards. We don't go asking.
No, never.
We say, hey, you know what I need, dude, like, I'm ready. But if there's a misalignment there, it's, wow, I'm not ready. Why am I not ready?
Right.
And that's where I had been this last year. Well, a long time, to be honest, but especially this last year, is what is in the way of me receiving?
Right. Because it's not because God's not giving.
No.
I mean, that's where anytime I've looked back and I'm like, oh, there was God. I mean, I wasn't feeling it, but there he was the whole time. But it's because we're not, we're looking at our little, closed view and not prepared to receive the message, the understanding, the revelation, sometimes the truth. I mean, sometimes it's actually being honest with ourselves about what's really going on and being accountable for how we're participating in it. That's hard. Right? And so how do we receive if we're blocking ourselves because we're not willing to actually see the truth? It's not because God's not trying to show us or tell us or guide us. It's because we're blocking, we're not hearing, we're not open, we're not grounded.
Can I add to this? My actual experience, and this is what I remind myself of when I get to that spot, what you just described, which is in the receiving, it's like, sometimes that vulnerability and that accountability, it's like, ooh, I did that. Ooh, I said that. Oh, I believe that. Oh no. Whatever. That the humbling aspects of life where you go, whoops. Yeah. Every single time, like, I actually kind of get excited about when I get checked. I do. Yeah. And I ask my friends, hey, be brave. I can be a little scary sometimes. I don't
30 seconds, she comes down.
I don't mean to be, I'll have a freak out. I'll go sideways, I'll be quiet for a minute and then I'll come back to it. But I am excited about being checked because in my experience over the years, it's not that I was always, but in my experience over the years is when I'm checked and I'm humble and I'm open and I change, whatever that change looks like for me, not what everybody else wants, not what anybody else thinks, but where that information's coming from me, life is honestly miraculous. I'm like, every single time, I'm like, woo, holy moly, didn't see that, didn't know that, sure, I've seen that, I've been getting away with it, blah, 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 whatever those things are. The shift that comes from that in my actual tangible life is 100% tenfold every time in the positive direction. Right. So I get excited about my friends who are courageous.
It's not easy.
Thank you for being brave.
And I think, and it's like what you said too, even if the truth of the scenario, the reality that you come to, the awareness, right, the listening, the guidance isn't always what's best for everyone else.
True.
I mean, the hard part is that sometimes the most honoring thing you can do for someone is telling them what they don't want to hear.
Very true.
And that's, I think, where we get a lot of confusion, right? We get confused around like, well, I can't do that, can't do that. But the freedom comes from being honest with yourself, right? And then honest with everyone around you, because then everybody can make their decisions from that.
Exactly.
Rather than coming from a place that's not true.
Misunderstood or misled or whatever,
right.
Yeah.
And that's how we elevate ourselves. That's how we rise above and we become more resilient, and we get out of the story, the narrative that's going on, is that we don't continue to make our choices and actions based on the reality we see, but the reality that God's giving us. I mean, his view is way beyond. And if we constantly make our decisions based on this is what I can do, this is only what I can do, this is what this person's only capable of, then we're always getting stuck and we're not receiving guidance, we're not listening. But if we can actually open up to it, it's like, wow, there's a whole world up here that I didn't even know existed because I've been so close to it. That's exciting. That's exciting. How we rise above, and we don't get affected by the negativity. It's existed throughout history. Yeah. It's just more tangible now because we're more connected. It's easier for, let's say, nefarious players to be organized.
Right.
And, we didn't have, think about the tyrants of the past. Yeah. Right? They had their
forever.
Country.
Yeah, they took forever.
Right. Right. And they weren't going global.
No. And we took forever. We had time.
Oh yeah.
To manage that. Here's one of the
things. Centuries to get to, what we've gone in a short time.
Oh. Yeah, 3 years, right? Or whatever, short period of time. So here's my question, because we need to wrap this up. Yep. For this time, this moment. We'll do another one soon. Yes. Because they're so fun. Yes. When we're both ready. What would be a message that you'd want to share based on, let me think here for a second. What we just wrapped up was the amount of change, adaptation, amount of stuff that people are going through right now, the I don't know question at the end of a big conversation. Like, what would you suggest people do right now? Or what do you do? Let's just not talk about people. Let's talk about you.
Well, I think that's a very personal choice. I mean, in the sense that I think that we've all got an innate gift, an innate way that we were created on this earth to show up in. And it's not for greatness in the sense, your gift is great, but it doesn't mean we have to be great.
The result of it, the result of it is not.
But by being honest with yourself, by listening, by being quiet, by simplifying, by having practices that keep you consistent, that allow you to be grounded, it means as we're weathering these storms, literally and figuratively, as we're, the world is changing, it's more chaotic and out of control, we can rise above it and choose not to participate in it.
Yeah. We can be objective about it and look at it and then make guided, conscious, elevated choices. And I think when I think about the actual solution to all of this, and I've gone through it a couple times, is I want people to practice what love feels like. Like, there's the simple practice in being guided intuitively, whatever, guided by spirit, by God, whoever it is, whatever it is. For me, like, I started practicing, I don't even know how, I mean, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, how do I do these things? And it's not that I'm perfect at them either, but love feels a very certain way in my mind, in my physical body, in my heart, in my voice, in my energy, my patience, my, where I'm coming from. And it's almost like a physical release. It's like when I feel joy, peace, love, contentment, all those things, there's a freedom that I feel. And then when I feel anything but that, it isn't that it's wrong or bad. It's just something for me to look at. Right. It's like, oh, that doesn't feel like that love. That feels like resistance. Right. The challenge or whatever. I gotta check it. I gotta look at it. Yeah. So that has allowed me to really be guided well. And honestly, the choices I've been making are crazy to me sometimes. I'm like, wow, this feels right, but wow.
It's not always logical.
And not always easy.
No.
Right?
No, they're hard.
And then I'm like, is this a pattern of mine? You know, you kind of go through it, and is this really true for me, or is it unconscious habit, sabotage, whatever that is, right?
Right.
Or inspired. So I think what I would love to leave people with also is, I mean, all of the things that we talked about, I'd like to get into more detail about, but really just ground in love. Practice what love actually feels like to you. Like you said, it's a personal thing. And then know what doesn't feel like love, and just see it, look at it instead of feeling it.
Right.
You know, look at it and go, oh, what is that?
Right. And
objectively look at what it's for, and without judgment. Because when we do that, we're not intellectualizing anything, and our choices from that place are 100% in our favor every single time.
Right.
100% hands down.
Yeah.
Even if
it doesn't look like it in the moment.
We're losing something, we're breaking up with somebody, we're moving to a different country, whatever it is.
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, really that's perspective, right? I mean, the reality is we all have a choice. We have a choice to how to see something and how to perceive it, and we can even, you know, we can look at the hard things we go through and wonder why, or we can say, what's the purpose? What am I going to do with this? How is this going to help me evolve as my human experience on this earth?
Right.
You know, and at the end of the day, I think we're here to connect with other human beings, to lift each other up.
Yes.
We're meant to be in community. We're not meant to exist alone.
Absolutely
so
not.
Your gift is no good to yourself.
Right. Yeah.
It's actually here for the world. So when we share that, that's when we feel love.
Yeah.
That's
very
when
true.
We feel connected. That's when we feel purposeful.
Yeah. I would say this too. Make sure that the contribution is yours, not what society says you should do, not what your parents say you should do, not what whatever. But make sure it's yours, because that feels different too.
Yes.
You know. But first of all, Alana, thank you for managing to spend this time with me, and vice versa.
And are we nice and glowing right now?
Yeah. Right. And I'm really obviously looking forward to the next time we actually do this. If anybody's actually listening to this, I'm sure that we are getting other people listening. And honestly, we're doing this just because it's so much fun. But if there's anything that you ever want to contribute, we are on social media, right?
We are. Yeah, it's there. I can't say there's a lot of posts, but if you ever feel, hey, would you guys be willing to do this topic?
Yes.
We're always open.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Anything that, especially in some of the topics that might be a bit spicy, you know, I'm like, because I like looking at things that I may not know. But anyway, thank you for listening if you have been, and even as long as this has been an hour, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
We're on track.
We are going to wrap it up and head to a country music concert at a winery. You know? You got to celebrate. You got to celebrate. Tough times. We're ready to celebrate.
Being the most positive we can be, right?
Yeah.
Got to look at the bright side. Thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.